So, this will be the second part of our study on depression. For this study, we will be looking at right living. Since this study is more focused on depression, where our last study was focused on suicide, I think this will be a good time to try to define depression to show what we're trying to address here. So, according to the Mayo Clinic, depression is defined as a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness or loss of interest. I've heard it used to refer to anything from being a little sad to strictly being kept to only refer to measurable chemical imbalances in people's brains. There's an anecdotal story I like that shapes how I think about it. So the story goes like this. There was a farmer who was showing signs of depression because he suddenly lost interest in things and was often sad. But when people talked to him and asked him about why he was sad, it was because his cow died and that was his main source of income. So when he was bought a new cow, he was feeling all better. Some people would call that depression, and some people wouldn't call it that. And I prefer not to make a judgment on if that's depression or not, but I just like to understand that some people use the word that way and some people choose not to use the word that way. And then there's the other case where somebody feels sad and they lose interest in things and there's no discernible reason for that, but then once they get on depression medication, they start doing better, and that's more generally accepted to be depression. So for our study, we're mostly going to be trying to address things closer to the cow story, but we're going to be focusing on things that are a bit less obvious than losing a cow. Like for this study, we'll be looking at wealth and what we're choosing to pursue in life. And we have a culture these days that often pushes outcomes like once you get to be famous or once you get to be rich or something like that, that's when you'll be happy. And then we have accounts from plenty of famous and rich people that say once they got there, they weren't happy. So that's clearly not the answer. And what is the answer might be what people wonder, and we can turn to the Bible for that. And for all of our Christians listening, we probably have a spoiler. The answer is Jesus, but it's really complicated because, like, to just say Jesus doesn't really cure anything, but to completely understand, like, this pursuit of Jesus can help us find a lot more happiness. And I think it can address people who are facing things like the cow issue, but more like, what am I to be doing? That kind of thing. So, we're going to be looking at Ecclesiastes, which is a book that is pretty complicated and hard to read from my perspective. I had a hard time with it the first time I was going through it front to back, so I'll try to make it a little easier by starting at the very end. That way we know what we're going for, and then I'll jump back to lessons that I think go together. And that's how we'll be structuring it. Today, we'll be looking at wealth related things. So Ecclesiastes is a book that is written by a son of David. Different Christians have taken like different ideas of who exactly it is. Traditionally, you would think Solomon would be the one because he was the wise one who became the king. Some people say it could be any son of David that became a king, and other people still say it could be a fictional character that this one that like wrote the story. And then what it actually is an author commenting on what was written. So at the very beginning, you'll hear from the author, and at the very end, you'll hear from the author. So right now, we're going to be going to Ecclesiastes 12, verses 9 through 14, and this will be a comment from the author with his conclusion on what the teacher was teaching. So, I will start reading now from verse 9. Not only was the teacher wise, but he also imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. So the words of the wise are like goads, their collected sayings like firmly embedded nails given by one shepherd. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. So now from this, there's a few things I want to point out. So in verse 11, they're calling the words here like goads. So the way to think about that is like a shepherd who has a sharp stick that's trying to poke his sheep to go in the right direction. So a lot of this book is pretty, I would say maybe depressing to read because a lot of what he says is like meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. So there's a poetic aspect to it that if you don't have the understanding that he's trying to like keep the sheep away from things that are dangerous for them by poking them in the right direction, you might think the dude who wrote it is just being mean rather than trying to be helpful. But what he's really trying to do is point people into a right path. And then another thing I wanted to point out is it says, be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. So right now I'm putting things in addition to it. So you got to be warned of what I'm saying. I hope I'm doing a good job, but be sure to trust the Bible over me in everything. So sometimes I can mess up with my interpretations and things like that. And it's a wise warning to be warned of the additional stuff like my things. So hopefully I do my best and can give you some helpful information. But remember, I'm just a person, and there's plenty of other takes and studies out there on Ecclesiastes that might be able to do a better job of it than I do. And then he says the conclusion of the matter is to fear God and keep his commandments. That's the duty of all mankind. So, what are God's commandments and how do we keep them? That's one of the things we can look at here and some wisdom of how to follow those things. So next we'll be going to Ecclesiastes 5, starting in verse 10, and he'll be talking about money. I'll give everyone a second to get there while I take a drink of water. All right, I will begin reading now. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them, and what benefit are they to the owners except to feast their eyes on them? The sleep of the laborer is sweet, whether they eat little or much, but as for the rich, their abundance permits them no sleep. I have seen a grievous evil under the sun, wealth hoarded to the harm of its owners, or lost through some misfortune, so that when they have children there is nothing left for them to inherit. Everyone comes naked from their mother's womb, and everyone comes, so they depart. They take nothing from their toil that they can carry in their hands. This too is a grievous evil. As everyone comes, so they depart. And what do they gain, since they toil for the wind? All their days they eat in darkness, with great frustration, affliction, and anger. This is what I have observed to be good, that it is appropriate for a person to eat, to drink, and to find satisfaction in their toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of their life God has given them, for this is their lot. Moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions, and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift from God. They seldom reflect on the days of their life because God keeps them occupied with gladness of their heart. So here we can see the teacher warning against pursuing wealth, and then what he suggests is good is enjoying to eat and drink and to enjoy the possessions that you get, as well as to seldom reflect on the days of your life and be occupied with gladness of heart. So, the way I read this, what I take away is life is more about enjoying the journey than the destination. And that's kind of like a cliche movie sort of summary of it, but it's kind of what I see here. So, like, to be able to enjoy your toil or like your work definitely is a blessing. So, rather than trying to find like a job that gives a lot of money, finding a job you can enjoy is, I think, a much better path to happiness and a bit of what I see being suggested here. And for people who are students and things like that, try to enjoy the classes, is what I would suggest, and not be so heavily dependent on enjoying the grade at the end. Because when you get to the end, if you enjoyed the class, whether you passed or failed, you're still going to have quite a bit of happiness. Where, like, if you're totally dependent on the grade at the end, if you get an A, you'll be happy for maybe a few seconds and then have to go back to trying to get an A for the next time. Where when you enjoy the class, you're more able to keep a consistent sense of happiness going. It's the same for careers and things like that. When you're pursuing money, when you actually get there, it might be happy for a little bit, but not great for a very long time, is generally what I sort of see. Same with fame, I would bet. But if you're enjoying the path there, then there's a more consistent sort of happiness. So, like, having work you enjoy, or like if, I guess for Gen Z, the most desired career by like a high percentage of them from studies I've seen. It seems like everybody wants to be a content creator on the internet. So it seems like people might be going for fame a lot these days. And I think if people are dependent on the success of becoming famous, they won't really have a lot of happiness doing their thing. But if they are enjoying making the videos, enjoying the content they're creating, and enjoying the process of being a creator like that, they might have a lot more happiness along the way than being so outcome dependent. So that's a suggestion from this lesson, and I think it's a way to take away a lot of sadness from people's lives and point yourself to a lot of happiness. And now for our next part, we'll be reading. It's to This one is a bit about investments and being wise about investments. So, the reason I picked out this section to read as well is to not suggest to people that they should like give up on pursuit of things, because the pursuit of things, if you can enjoy it, it can be a huge blessing. And then this practical advice from this section, I think, helps people to understand that the teacher is not just like, you should stop everything kind of a message, but rather an encouraging, keep going in the right direction kind of message. So, starting in 11, I will be reading 1 through 6. Ship your grain across the sea. After many days, you may receive a return. Invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land. If the clouds are full of water, they pour rain on the earth. Whether a tree falls in the south or to the north, in a place where it falls, there it will lie. Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the cloud will not reap. As you do not know the path of the wind, or how the body is formed in the mother's womb, so you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things. Sow your seeds in the morning, and at evening let your hands not be idle, so that for you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that, or whether both will do equally well. So this is practical investment advice that I've found to be true. It's personally related to me quite a bit because I fund my ministry through an investment company, and there's a lot of wisdom here suggesting that you're in many ventures because if one fails, then you have other ventures to help keep you going. So I've had a few bad investments in my life, but I've also had many other investments. So when I have the bad one, yeah, that's a sad little time for me. But it is the other ones were able to keep me going through those times. So having the bad thing happen wasn't completely devastating because it was spread out into many different things. And I think that's a really good bit of wisdom for people. And if we tie that together with the wisdom from the last section we read, the more important part is to have fun doing the ventures and enjoy that rather than being so focused on the outcome of the ventures. So from this, I'd hope to eventually become the type of person who, if a venture I had were to ever go bad, instead of feeling sad at all, I'd be happy that I had fun doing the venture itself rather than dependent on the outcome. So, those are my lessons and takeaways from these two sections of Ecclesiastes. Next time, we'll be looking at some other sections in the same book, and I hope this helps people have a better target to aim for so they know what to be trying for as they're going about their days to enjoy the processes of those days rather than be outcome dependent. And now I will end the recording and open it to questions.